Hello everyone, got top 10 dirty mother-in-law jokes for you today. So a man went to the hospital to visit his mother-in-law, who was in serious condition. On the way back, the wife, very worried, asks, "So, honey, how's my mom doing?" He replies, "She looks great. She is in good health. She will still live for many years. Next week she will be released from the hospital and will come and live with us forever." "Wow, that's amazing," says the surprised wife, "but this is very strange, dear. Yesterday she seemed to be on her deathbed. The doctors said she should have a few days to live." "Well, I don't know how she was yesterday," he replied, "but today when I arrived at the hospital, the doctor told me that we should prepare for the worst." So a newlywed farmer and his wife were visited by her mother, who immediately demanded an inspection of their home. The farmer had genuinely tried to be friendly to his new mother-in-law, hoping that it could be a friendly, non-antagonistic relationship. To no avail, she kept nagging them at every opportunity, demanding changes, offering unwanted advice, and making life unbearable for the farmer and his new bride. While they were walking through the barn, the farmer's mule suddenly reared up and kicked the mother-in-law in the head, killing her instantly. At the funeral service a few days later, the farmer stood near the casket and greeted folks as they walked by. The pastor noticed that whenever a woman would whisper something to the farmer, he would nod his head and say something. Whenever a man walked by and whispered to the farmer, however, he would shake his head and mumble a reply. Very curious as to this bizarre behavior, the pastor later asked the farmer what that was all about. The farmer replied, "The women would say, 'What a terrible tragedy,' and I would nod my head and say, 'Yes, it was.' The men would ask, 'Can I borrow that mule?' And I would shake my head and say, 'Sorry, I can't do it. It's booked up for a year.'" So a couple invites their family over for Thanksgiving night and invites the whole family to spend the holiday and meal together. The family gathers, but the couple's children are late and the mother-in-law complains aloud, "Mug, your children, always late." Eventually, everyone comes and sits down to eat. The mother-in-law insists on sitting at the head of the table and no one has the strength to argue with her. After a few minutes, the hungry mother-in-law begins to complain, "Ugh, what's with the food here? Why is it always late?" A few minutes later, the couple bring out the meal they have prepared for their family, mostly cooked by the wife. Everyone eats and the evening continues. While they are in the middle of their main course, the mother-in-law says, "Ugh, I better start clearing the dishes so we can at least move on to the last dish on time." A mere second after she gets up, the large wall clock hanging over the head of the table falls down, reducing her chair to pieces and almost hitting her. Everyone is in shock until the bride mumbles to herself, "Ugh, this clock. Always late." So Ben went on safari with his wife and mother-in-law. One evening, while still deep in the jungle, the wife awoke to find her mother gone. Rushing to her husband, she insisted on them both trying to find her mother. Ben picked up his rifle, took a swig of whiskey, and started to look for her. In a clearing not far from the camp, they came upon a chilling sight. The mother-in-law was backed up against a thick, impenetrable bush, and a large male lion stood facing her. The wife said, "What are we going to do?" "Nothing," said Ben. "The lion got himself into this mess. Let him get himself out of it." So George went on a vacation to the Middle East with his family, including his mother-in-law. During their vacation in Jerusalem, George's mother-in-law died. With the death certificate in his hand, George went to the American consulate office to make arrangements to send the body back to the United States for a proper burial. The consul told George that to send the body back to the United States for burial is very, very expensive. It could cost him as much as $5,000. The consul told him, in most cases, the person responsible for the remains normally decides to bury the body here in Jerusalem. This would only cost him $150. George thinks for some time and answers, "I don't care how much it will cost to send the body back. That's what I want to do." The consul says, "You must have loved your mother-in-law very much considering the difference in price." "No, it's not that," says George. "You see, I know of a case many years ago of a man that was buried here in Jerusalem. On the third day he arose from the dead. I just can't take that chance." So a mother-in-law arrives home from the shops to find her son-in-law Pete in a steaming rage and hurriedly packing his suitcase. "What happened, Patty?" she asks anxiously. "What happened? I'll tell you what happened. I sent an email to my wife telling her I was coming home today from my fishing trip. I get home, and guess what I found? Yes, your daughter, my wife Jean, naked with Tim McDermott in our marital bed. This is unforgivable, the end of our marriage. I'm done. I'm leaving forever." "Come now, calm down, Patty," says his mother-in-law. "There is something very odd going on here. Jean would never do such a thing. There must be a simple explanation. I'll go speak to her immediately and find out what happened." Moments later, the mother-in-law comes back with a big smile. "There now, Pete, you see. I told you there must be a simple explanation." "Well, what is it?" fumed Pete. "She never got your email." So during King Solomon's reign, there was a handsome, successful young man who was wanted by all the young maidens in the kingdom. This young man was certainly aware of his advantages, and he would go wild with different girls and promise each of them the whole world. While most of the ladies knew he could not be trusted, two young women took his words seriously and announced to their family that they were going to marry the most successful and beautiful man in the kingdom. The rumors of the marriage spread, and the two mothers of the young women who heard that someone else would marry the wanted man began to quarrel over the fate and future of their daughters. After failing to settle the dispute, the two mothers decided to go to King Solomon, the wisest man, and ask him to decide which of their daughters would marry the boy. They dragged the young man to court and made their claims to the wise king. Solomon listened to them patiently, and after they finished he ordered, "Bring me the greatest sword in the palace. I will split the man in two, and each woman will receive half of him." The first mother looked rather indifferent and said, "Bring him the sword." The other mother, who was shocked by the order, yelled, "Your Majesty, remove the command. I will give up the groom, only do not spill his blood." King Solomon looked at the two women with a big smile and said, "The first mother's daughter will marry the young man." The confused court clerk turned to Solomon and said, "My wise king, aren't you confused? The first mother was willing to cut that young man into two." "Right." King Solomon replied, "This proves that she is worthy of being his real mother-in-law." So one day, a woman walks into a dentist's office and asks how much it will cost to extract wisdom teeth. $80, the dentist says. That's a ridiculous amount. The woman says, "Isn't there a cheaper way?" Well, the dentist says, "If you don't use an anesthetic, I can knock the price down to $60. "That's still too expensive," replies the woman. "Okay," says the dentist. "If I save on anesthesia and simply rip the teeth out with a pair of pliers, I can knock the price down to $20. "Nope," moans the woman, "it's still too much. "Well," says the dentist, scratching his head, "if I let one of my students do it, I suppose I can knock the price down to $10. "Marvelous," says the woman. "May I book my mother-in-law for next Tuesday, please?" So two friends meet each other on the street. "Hello. Where are you coming from?" asked Bill. "Oh, don't ask me. I'm coming from the cemetery. I just buried my mother-in-law," replied Sid. "I'm so sorry," said Bill, "but why is your face scratched all over?" "It wasn't so easy," said Sid. "She put on a hell of a fight." So three sisters each get married in a short space of time. The men's now mother-in-law decides to test all of them. She decides to take each of them on a walk separately. The mother-in-law takes the first guy on a walk. She accidentally falls into a deep pond. The man doesn't hesitate. He jumps in and saves her. The next day, the man gets a phone notification that he received $500 with the description, "Thanks for all you did for me, your mother-in-law, Sarah." She then tests the second guy and again accidentally falls into the same pond. He doesn't hesitate either and jumps in to save her. The next day, he too gets a notification on his phone that he received $500, also with the description, "Thanks for all you did for me, your mother-in-law, Sarah." She then tests the third guy and again accidentally falls into the pond. The guy looks around if anyone can see, decides that no one is watching, and walks away. The next day, he gets a phone notification that he received $500 as well with the description, "Thanks for all you did for me, your father-in-law, James."